Okay, it's very good. Okay. Now, labor is one of the key elements in our course classification, which we have already discussed about in our previous class. And then tonight is just to talk about how the treatment of labor, how can we treat labor in an organization. So for every organization to carry out their activities, they need human power, which is very key to help an organization to achieve their aims and objectives. And it is also very important for every organization to establish a well-sound remuneration policy in order to ensure labor costs are well efficiency controlled to motivate the employee to help them to perform effectively. And for an organization to achieve this, they have to come up with a different approach, different remuneration method, and an effective scheme that we much align with an employee performance to help an organization achieve their goals. Every organizations, whether manufacturing company or service company, each of the organization try to make sure that they were able to come up with a well-structured remunerations to motivate their workers. When we are discussing about cost classification, we were able to discuss about the classification of costs, where we say labor costs are classified into two, where we explain direct labor cost and the indirect labor costs. And then we say direct labor costs are those costs that are related to the cost of our productions. We also discuss that we have production department and then non-production departments. All those costs that are related to the productions of an organization are the one that we classified as direct labor costs, where indirect labor costs we also say is part of an overhead for an organizations, just like those employees that are to support the production department to make sure that all their activities are in line with the projections and plan of an organizations. The major aspect of all these things is just to help an organization to make a proper decision, whenever they plan, and then they make sure that their plan are in line with their objective. And then once this objective is being made, they will be able to make a decision that will help an organization to grow more. So in that aspect, when we are talking about the indirect labor costs, we are referring to those support production units, maybe like administrative cost, distribution cost, and any other costs that are not related to the production costs. Those are the costs that are referred to as indirect labor. And it gets to a basis where some costs are not directly classified as direct labor costs. Every organization employed an employee for a purpose. And then in that aspect, if an employee are being paid to carry out a particular production work or to carry out a particular level of activities, maybe at the point of productions, there are limited level of productions in the organizations. In that aspect, it will create an idle time, where an idle time simply means where an organization is not being engaged in the level of production at a particular period of time. So in that aspect, if any productions comes in that particular area, any costs, labor costs incurred at that particular time are not to be recorded or to be classified as a relevant cost, because the employee involved in this particular production level has already been classified as an employee to an organization that are responsible for a particular level of productions at the end of the day. So now, what is basic salary? Basic salary is just a fixed amount or wages that an employee received for the standard hour in which they work. Basic salary, if an employer employ an employee now to carry out a productions, the salary that are being paid to a particular labor is what we refer to as basic salary. And there are some situations that may warrant an organization to pay some overtimes or other benefits to the organization, to the employee, to carry out their activities. So in the situations where there is an overtime, an overtime usually come up where an employee work beyond their normal hour. For example, now, per day, an organization schedule 8 hours as their normal working hour. Maybe due to the demand of the productions from the customer, it's now require an extra time for an organization to meet up with the targets of the customer. So any hours that an employee used above their normal hour, it's what we call an overtime. And then an employer is going to pay for that certain amount of hour that an employee spend above their normal hour rates or normal hour level of productions. So, but if this normal hour happened in a situation whereby there is an idle time for an employee, an organization might decide to set a restrictions where an overtime will not be paid. We have a formula where we used to calculate an overtime. Whenever we want to calculate an overtime, we usually use a total overtime rates, which means we want to calculate how much do a particular employee earn to carry out their productions. We want to know the total, both the basic salary and the overtime bonuses that an employer decided to give an employee over the period of time. So whenever I want to calculate this, we say basic hourly rates. If an employee normal hourly rate is 8 hours, and then for every hour they are to pay them 10 naira. Now, how can we calculate the basic hourly rates? It has already been projected by the organization that the normal hourly rate is 8 hours. And therefore, every 1 hour they spend, they are going to pay them 10 naira. For you to get the basic hourly rate, is you just multiply the total number of hours they work, which is 8 hours, multiply it by the rate per hour, which is 10 naira. So whatever you get is going to give us our basic hourly rate. But in the situations where there's an overtime, where an employee work for 10 hours, it has already existed is a normal hourly working hour scheduled by the organizations. So the total number of hours that it uses above the normal hour is what is known as overtime. And then an employer is going to pay for such overtime. There might be a situation where an organization have already set the structures of how the payment of the employee should be. An employer might decide to come up with a structure if an employee work above their normal hour, they are going to pay them a certain rate. An employee work for 8 hours, which is normal based on the projections or the organization structures. And then they plan to be paying them to 2 naira per their normal working hour. And then whenever they work an overtime, they will be paying them 1 naira for the overtime. So that 1 naira is what we are going to calculate with the total number of hours that an employee spend above their normal time. So that is how we can usually calculate for total over time rate or total wages and salary of a particular employee. So I want to be fast so that we can treat 1 or 2 questions. So now, after we have talked about the basic salary, we have talked about overtime, talk about the idle. Now, how all these labor costs can be recorded? What are the methods that an organization can use to record the labor costs? Like I make mention earlier, that every organization have a method on how they design the allocated costs, or they design the allocated salaries or rates for every employee. Now, they have 2 major methods that an organization usually used to come up with accounting for labor. One of the major method is payroll record. This payroll just show the number of the employee, and then are they directly related to the production level? Are they non-production level workers? This payroll schedule is going to be the one to help an organization knows the number of the employee that belongs to each of the cost center or each of the productions or non-production departments. And secondly is timesheets or time recording sheets. This is just like a score card that record the number of hours that an employee uses to carry out a particular productions. Like an example, if a worker spend like 20 hours on a particular productions, maybe in production A, and then another workers spend 15 hours on a production B. Is this timesheet that will allow an organization to allocate costs between these two productions. You can see the differences between the two methods now. These are the key methods that an organization usually use to record the allocation of a cost or accounting for labor for their employee. Now, remuneration method. In this remuneration method, we have two major remuneration methods. We have time-related system method. This is the most common method that an organization usually use to calculate the wages based on the number of hours an employee work. They need to determine how many hours did an employee work to carry out a particular productions, and then how much do an organization set to pay for every hours in which an employee is going to spend in producing a particular productions. So whenever we want to calculate a basic remuneration using time-related system, is just to know how many hours do an employee work, and then how much do we charge or do we decide to pay them on an hourly basis. The purpose of this, like I mentioned, is just to make sure that whatever an organization is paying to an employee is in line with their level of productions, is in line with the structures of the organization in order to avoid overpayment and underpayment to carry out their production. So what are the advantages of this time-related system? I'll just mention, then move to the next remuneration method. We have a predictable cost. In this aspect, it's very easy for an organization to budget how much they are going to pay for their employee. And then it also help an organization to monitor the quality of the productions. And then it also gives a room for fair pay. It's not maybe an employee will work for 8 hours and you pay them for 7 hours. No. This time-related system will help an organization to know how many hours do every employee work, and then what are the hourly rates of each of the productions they made. So some of the limitation, no performance incentives, idle time risks, high labor overhead, no less flexibility, and then no motivation. So those are the limitations on that time related system. And then the second method is what we call outputs or piecework related system. This is another remuneration method that an organization can use to pay their employee. This one is just where an organization will set a fixed amount per unit of products that an employee produce. An organization can decide to come up with a standard that every employee that produces 1,000 units of products, for every unit they produce, they are going to pay them 20 naira. So if an employee produce 100, it means they are going to pay them according to the 100 units of products that they produce. If any employee produces above the organization targets, they are going to pay them according to what they produce. This also gives a rule to motivate an employee in order for them to meet their targets in their level of productions. And then this method also created to monitor cost control. It gives an organization to know on how to make payments to each an employee based on their level of production. If there are 3 employees assigned to produce a particular product, product A, product B, and then product C. The first labor produces 1,000. The second one produces 1,002. While the third one produces 1,005. The one that produces 1,005, it's not going to pay for 1,000. No, it's going to be paid according to what he or she produced in the organizations. So this particular piecework related system gives a room to motivate an employee to produce or to give their high level of dedication to the organizations in order for them to receive more based on what they produce for. Now, for example, in this piece related system, a worker in a factory is paid under a piece work system. Now, in an exam, whenever you see a piece work system, make sure that first thing that comes to your mind is talking about the payment they are going to pay for an employee that has already been fixed based on, if in the question they have already specified it that an employee is paid under a particular remuneration system. Make sure that whatever the rates they give per unit of that production is what is going to be calculated for the employee to know their total wages. Now, a worker in a factory is paid under a piece work system at the rate of 150 per unit. An organization decided to pay a worker under the piece work system that when whatever they produce, they have already set aside per unit, they'll be paying them 150. And then if the workers produces 200 in a week, now how much is going to be their total wages? Very simple. Just multiply the total units the employer produces with the total units, the total rate per unit to come up with the total wages. You know, when we get to the main exercise where we'll be able to explain more better of this, we know how this piecework system actually works. So another approach is an incentive scheme. You know, this is just to boost an organization productive system. You know, to motivate an employee, to encourage them to do more in helping an organization to achieve their targets. You know, this incentive is totally different from their basic salary. You know, like some of the organizations usually do that, they'll be paying 13-month salary at the end of the year. You know, this as sign of an incentive program just to motivate an employee, you know, to encourage them to make sure that they put their time in helping an organization to achieve their aims. You know, we have two type of incentive. We have individual based, and then we have a group based system. You know, this individual based where an employee are being rewarded based on their personal performance. You know, like every organization can decide to be doing an employee appraiser for their employee at the end of the month. You know, the best employee of the month, you know, the best employee of the week. You know, all these things are just a way of encouraging an employee to do more in an organization. And then the group base is where an employer decided, or an organization decided to, you know, to reward a particular unit or a call center or a department based on their collective performance at the end of the period. You know, it can be months, it can be 6 months, it can be at the end of the year. You know, all these things is just to make sure that the organization gives a well-structured payment or a well-structured stream where they can encourage their employee to do more in order to help an organization to achieve their objective. Now, another one is labor turnover. You know, some of the organization usually faces this, most especially in a manufacturing organizations. You know, where some of the employees decided to resign, you know, maybe due to the environment, due to the organization environment, or due to the personal growth or personal career advancement of each of the employee that they have at the beginning and at the end of the period. So it's not the structure that, okay, at the end of the period, how many employees they have resigned in the organizations. You know, that is where this labor turnover comes in. It helps an organization to know the percentage of the number of the employee that leaves the organization at the end of the period. You know, there is a particular formula that usually used, to determine the labor turnover rate. To determine the labor turnover rate is for an organization to know the number of the employee that is leaving divided by the number of the employee that they have present. Then they will now multiply it by 100. Now, how can you know the average of the number of the employee that you have? It's very simple. Just check your payroll design. How many number of the employee do we open with? Maybe starting from the January to December, they want to monitor it. Then they now check the number of the employee they have as at January. And then as at December, they check the number of the employee they have. And then they divided it by 2. It will give them the number of the employee, the average number of the employee they have as at the period. And then also to know the number of the employee that have already left the organization. So in order for us to understand this better, I come up with this very simple example. At 1st January, a company employed 3,601 employees. And at 31st December, an employee were 3,735. It means the number of employees have reduced. Now, during the year, 624 employees choose to leave the organizations. Now, the question here is, what was the labor turnover rate at the end of the period? Now, what we are going to do in this case, we have already know the number of the employees that leave, which is 624 employees. Then how are we going to determine the average number of the employee? Now, what you will just do in case this kind of question comes in the objective aspect, the open with 3,634 plus the closing employee at the end of the period, which is 3,735. Now, if you add these two together, plus 3,735, it's going to give us 7,376. Now, divided by 2. Divided by 2, it gives us 3,688. It means the average of the employee is 3,388. And then the formula says the number of the employee that leaves. And then from the question, the number of the employee that leaves is 624. Then divided by the average number of the employee, which is 3,688. Now, what is going to be our labor turnover rate? 624 divided by 3,688. Now, it gives us 0.1692, then multiply by 100. Since we are looking for the percentage, multiply by 100. Now, if you multiply this by 100, it's going to give us 16.9. Approximately, it will give us 17%. It means at the end of the period, an employee that leave the organization is 17%. Now, all these things that we have been discussing, you know, from from the labor turnover. Now, and I decided to come up with these questions from ICANN past questions. I think 2022 or 2023. Now, the part A says the two main labor remuneration methods are time rate system and piece rate system. Now, the question now is list 5 advantages of each of them. We have already discussed about the advantages. Whenever you see this in the question, just go back to the advantages and then you pick them one after the other. You pick for the time rate system and then the piece rate system. The one we are going to discuss here is the B part, where we want to do some calculation parts. So in this aspect, now we are asked to calculate the requirement. Like I usually said, whenever you see questions in ICANN exam, please, the first thing that should come to your mind is, what did they require us to do? What am I required to do? That is the first thing, because once you're able to know what they ask you to do, then you cannot go back to the questions. The questions will now help you to understand better on what the requirement is all about. Now, let me share my working screen. Just give me a minute. Let me do that. Okay, I want to believe that we can see this. Okay, thank you for labor. Now, we have been talking about the method, the remuneration method. And then in this question, we'll be able to help us to understand how these actually work in a practical area, to guide us to know how to attempt this in the exam. Now, the requirement says compute the total remuneration for the workers for the month. Now, let us go back to the questions. The big part of this question is what we are treating. There are 6 workers in the production department of the manufacturing company. And then the following information are extracted from the company record for the month. This company record can be from their timesheet or from the payroll, like we discussed earlier. And then the standard production per month is 1,250. So in this aspect, an organization have already set the standard of the productions they are expecting every employee to produce per month. Now, the production by each employee are as follows. Now, name of the employee and then the unit of what each of the employee produces. Ayo were able to produce 1,000, Bola were able to produce 1,000, and then Muzinat were able to produce 1,375, and then Dakwa were able to produce 900, and Yola were able to produce 1,125. Why Ahmed were able to produce 1,002. Now, this work rate is 100 naira per unit of production. Now, the organization decided to set one of the remuneration method. From this, they set piece rate system. No, like I made mention, piece work rate system are normally fixed rates per unit designed by the organizations. You know, whenever an employee produces, they are going to be paid according to what they produce based on this piece rate method. Now, in order to now encourage the employee further, additional bonus of 200 for each 1% of actual productions above 80% of actual production over standard. Now, what this one is talking about is, now, an organization sets 1,250 as their standard. And then they now come up with another incentive approach that, okay, to achieve this 1,002 at their standard might be difficult. But any of the employee that was able to meet up with at least 80% of the standard of the productions. You know, they were able to meet up with the 80%. That is when these 80% of the actual productions come in. So if an employee was able to meet up with 80% of what the standard is set, anything above that 80% now, any percentage or any unit they produce above that 80%, they are going to be giving them a bonus of 200 naira per 1% of it. And then
Oh, sorry, you just me.
Everybody.
Sorry, I think he has network issues and is trying to join. Mhm.
okay. What of now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I don't
Yes,
know.
I
The
can hear
network
you
is
now. I
okay. The
can hear you.
network has been giving us little challenges tonight. Okay. Now, as I was saying, you know, the organization also decided to come up with
Sorry,
another.
sorry, sir. You can't. I don't know if it's me. I can't see your screen.
Okay. Let me share again. Let me share. Okay. How about now, please? Can we see
Yes.
the screen now?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
I can see. I
All
can
right. That
see
is
now.
very fine. Okay. That is fine. Now, in order to motivate the workers again, the employee now decided, apart from their basic salary they are going to receive based on their productions, that okay, whether you meet up the targets or you do not meet up the targets, they have already set an allowances of 5,000 per month for every employee. So this one is general. Whether they meet up with their target or not, they are going to receive an extra 5,000 above what they produce. Now the question here is compute the total remuneration for the workers for the month. Now we want to compute the remunerations, how much each of the workers is going to receive. Those that meet up with the production unit, standard production unit per month, are those that did not meet up. How much each of the employee is going to receive at the end of the period. Now, whenever we see this kind of question in the exam, we need to pay more attention, and then I'm very careful for us to understand what the question asks us to do. Now, they are using a piece work rate where payment per unit of what they produce is being fixed, regardless of what they produced out. And then the organization also set up with another approach that, okay, it might be very difficult for each of the employees to meet up with their standard. But if they were able to produce 80%, above 80%, they are going to receive an additional bonus of 200 per 1% of actual productions. Now, I have two approaches that I want to use, but I think I'll just go with a very straightforward approach, to help us know the process, and then not to get us confused when we are preparing this. So I'm going to use a table format. And then if the table format is not really too comfortable with us, whenever we are maybe trying to practice it, you can decide to work the remuneration total, the remuneration amount based on the employee. But what I'm going to do here is to just use a table format approach. Now, computation of total workers' remunerations. Always make sure that you put your heading whenever you want to do. Now we have names of the employee. And then the standard unit that the organization sets. You want to now structure it out to compare with the actual. Now remember, the standard the organization sets is 1,250. Now you come here, it said standard. Now just give the abbreviation standard productions. And then here, the actual productions of what each of the employee produces. And then now, were they able to achieve their targets? That is where this achiever column comes in. And then if they achieve it over, the organization sets 80%, once they were able to meet up with the 80%, it is fine. Any unit that they produce above that 80% is going to be what they are going to receive a bonus for. Now, above 80%, and then the bonus. Now, remember, the bonus per unit is 200 naira. Okay, let me put 200 naira. I'm still going to expand it. 200 naira. And let me expand it to be so that we can be on the page. Okay. So that we can be on the same page. Please pay attention to this very well, because this way I will take my time to explain. Now, the name of each of the employee. Put it here. Now, what is the standard set by the organizations? The organization sets 1,002 as the standard. It sets 1,002 as the standard. Now, we now go back to the questions. Okay, since we already know that the standard set by the organization is 1,250, and then this is the actual of what each of the organization or each of the workers was able to produce. Now, you come to this place and write each of the actual production by each of the employee. Now, Ayo was able to produce 1,000. Bola was able to produce 1,250. Muzinat was able to produce 1,375. Dapo was able to produce 900. Eniola 1,125, and then Ahmed 1,002. Now, this is where we have work to do. Remember, they said if they were able to produce 80% of the standard, anything they produce above the 80%, they will receive a bonus of 200 per 200 naira per each 1% of the actual product. Now, how are we going to know the actual percentage that each of the employee were able to achieve? Now, please give me 1 minute. Let me take my calculator. So that when we are doing it, we'll just be on the same page together. Okay. Now, Ayo was able to produce 1,000. And then they said it's standard of 1,250. Now, okay, you produce 1,000. How many percentage of the budget were you able to meet up? Now you divide it by the standard. Okay, let me convert this to percentage, please. Let me convert this. We are using Excel, so we need to be converting it to percentage. Okay, so now Ayo was able to produce 1,000, while the organization sets 1,002. Now, how many percentage of these productions that Ayo was able to meet? Now, it's 80% of these productions. Is he going to receive any bonus above this? No, because he produces exactly what the organization is expecting them to produce based on their actual productions that they have already set against their standard. Because the organization said if they were able to produce 80% of the standard, that is what they set against the standard. Now, is it going to receive any additional bonuses on this? No, because he did not produce above what the organization set. So, but he was able to achieve the 80% set based on the actual standard. Now we move to the second person. No, let me just drag this down. Let me drag this down. Now, Bola was able to meet up 100%. It means it go above. Okay, someone is raising up his or her hand. Do you have anything to say? Danny, you raise up your hand.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Sorry, I
All
wanted
right.
to know the computation. How you got the 80%?
Okay, out they got the
What are
80%. Okay. Okay.
Yes, we
Now we are
achieved.
comparing the actual products, actual productions against the standard productions. Now, in this case, the formula is whenever you are making a comparison to know, okay, if an employee were able to meet up with the target that an organization sets, or if they did not be able to meet up, whenever you want to compare the actual productions against the standard production to know the percentage of which each of the employee were able to meet, is to just divided the actual of what the employee produced by the standard set by the organizations. It's going to give you the total percentage of what each of the employee was able to produce at the end of the period. Now, Ayo now produces 1,000 against the standard of 1,250. Even though the organization have already said that, okay, any employee that were able to meet 80% of our standard, you know, is going to that the like any employee that was able to meet the 80%, above 80%, is going to receive an additional bonuses. But in this case, Ayo was unable to meet up above that 80,000. It means what Ayo was able to produce is exactly 80,000. Is he going to receive bonus? No, because he was unable to meet up above that 80,000. He only produces exactly 80,000 of what an organization said above the actual, above the standard. So that is why Ayo is not going to receive any bonuses and any additional bonuses here. That is the reason why I create this bonus, that any employee that go above the 80% set by the organization, the percentage is going to be put in this particular column. Okay, another person is raising up a hand, his or her hand. Chinedu, can you please unmute and ask the question?
Sir, please, I'm still confused on how we got this percentage.
This percentage. Okay, let me go back to the question.
A formula we can use.
And yes, it's a formula that you can use. Whenever you are comparing the actual productions against the standard, you want to, for example, now, if you own a grocery shop, you are selling minerals, and then you plan to sell 100 pieces of coke every week. And then at the end of the week, you're able to sell 70 pieces. Now you want to compare what you sell against what you projected to sell at the end of the week to know the percentage of what you're able to sell above your standard. You just divided that actual production that you sell, that you're able to sell, you divide it by that standard that you budgeted to sell. So the actual production, the production that you sell or you produce against the standard that you already budgeted at the end of the period is going to give you the percentage of what you were able to produce or you're able to sell at the end of the period. That is how we arrive at this 80%. And then from the question, that is why I don't want anyone to get confused. From the questions, okay, Aliyu, you raise up your hand.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So if I can come in, I think when you divide the actual production by the standard production,
Yes.
for the first one, 1,000 divided by 1,250, it will give you
Yes.
0.8%. And
That
if
is,
you
yes, that
multiply
is 80%.
0.8%,
Multiply by 100.
yes,
You know,
it
because
will
we
give
base
you
it on
100.
percentage, and anything
Yes.
on percentage is multiplied by 100. I think maybe that is where we are having a little confusions.
Yes, I think that's
So
why
I believe we can get the explanation very well now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank you.
because we are working based on the question, because the organization have already said that any workers that was able to produce above 80% of the standard, anything above it, they will be paying 200 naira per 1% of it. Now, and Ayo was able to produce 80% of the standard, which means it's not entitled to additional bonus. And then in a case of Bola, Bola was able to produce above the actual production sets against the standard. Now, Bola was able to make up by producing 100%. You know, it's me the standard production that the organization sets. But the organization have already said, okay, if you're able to meet up the at least 80%, any percentage above it, you are going to get an additional bonus. Now, in these situations now, how are we going to know the addition percentage of Bola? Now is just this minus 0.0. Now, you know what I did here is Bola have already met up the target by producing 100%, which is above 80. Now, it means the remaining percentage above 80 now that Bola was able to achieve is 20%. So Bola is going to receive a bonus for this 20% that it produces above the 80% that the organization have already set above the standard productions. Now, let's come to the third person. Now, third person was able to achieve 110% by producing 1,375. You know, it's even past what the organization said. You know, it means this particular employee was able to, you know, produce even more better above what the organization said. You know, and then what is the percentage above the 80% is 30% here. Now let me put this two in also. Let me put this in percentage as well. Put this in percentage as well. Now, this person was able to meet up above 30%. Now, the fourth person was able to produce 900. You know, this person now is less than the actual 80% set by the organization. Is he going to receive any additional bonuses? No. It will have 0% here. So this one to 0%. Now, the fifth person now was able to produce 1,125. Now, this person was able to produce above the actual standard set against the standard now. This one is above 80%. It means 10% above the 80% now for this person, while the last person was able to produce 1,002. Now, which is equivalent to 96% of the standard, and it passed the actual production that our organization sets above the standard. So now, how are we going to calculate this? Just 96 minus the 80% is going to give us 16%. Now, it's only 4% that was able, 4 people that was able to achieve this by producing above the actual production set by the organizations. Now, are they going to receive an additional bonuses? Yes, they are going to receive an additional bonuses. Okay, someone is raising up his or her hand too, or me to ask question.
Yes, sir. Please, that
Okay.
last part, the one of Ahmed, 16%. You said 9.
I cannot hear you, please.
Like how we got the percentage for this particular.
How do we got the 16%? It's very simple. What the organization sets against their standard is 80%. Any employee that was able to produce above 80% will be receiving bonus. And then Ahmed was able to produce 90%, 96%. Now, for you to now know how many percentage that he uses above this 80% set by the organization, you just do this 90% minus the 80%, you get the 16%. That is how we are able to arrive at the 16%. What we are working towards here is this 80%. That's why I wrote it here, above 80%. Any employee that was able to produce above 80% will be the one to get the bonuses, will be the one to be entitled to bonuses. And it is only 4 workers that was able to meet up above this 80%. Bola, Mozinat, Eniola, and Ahmed. There are only 4 workers that was able to meet up with this 80% set by the organization above their standard products. Now, the question says, any employee that was able to produce above 80% will get 200 naira for each 1% of it. Now, it's very simple. Just multiply 200 by each of these percentage. Now, Ayo was unable to produce above the 80%. Is he going to receive anything? No. He's going to receive nothing. What of Bola? Bola was able to produce above the targeted 80%. And then he have 20% above. Is he going to receive an additional bonuses set for 200 naira per 1% increase? Yes. You multiply it by this at 20%. It means Bola is going to receive 20. Is going to receive what's supposed to be. I'm coming. That is a 20% multiplied by 200. 200. So 20%. Please give me 1 minute. Let me check the calculation here. Okay, 20%. All right. So now 200 was set for each of the percentage, and then Bola was able to meet up 20% of it. So it means for every 1% now, they are going to be paid for 200, and then Bola was able to have 20%. Multiply by 20, it will give us 4 thousand. So it means for this 200% that Bola was able to meet above the 80% set by the organization, now is going to receive 4,000 naira additional bonus. Now, the third person now was able to meet 30%, and then for every 1%, they will receive 200 naira. Now, multiplied by 30 is going to receive 6,000. Now, in order for us not to get confused, let me come to this place. 200 naira. Okay, let me just write it in full. 200 naira for every 1%. For every 1%. Now, Bola was able to achieve 20%. Bola was able to achieve 20%. Now, so if Bola was able to achieve 1%, how much is he going to get? It means for every 1% that Bola was able to achieve, it will get 200 naira. And then Bola was able to achieve 20%. So it means 200 naira multiplied by 20. So this 20 now is stand for the 20% that Bola was able to make to achieve above the normal standard set by the organizations. Now, this third person was able to meet up with any percentage, so it's going to get 0. Eniola was able to meet up with 10%. It means 200 naira multiplied by 10. So it's going to get 2,000 naira. And then Ahmed was able to meet up with 16%. And then they are paying 200 naira for every percentage that they meet, multiplied by 16. Now, Ahmed is going to get 3,200 per bonuses. Now, we have been calculating the bonuses. What of their normal basic salary? We have not calculated that one. Then you come to this place, right? Basics payments. Basic payments. Now, you go back to the questions. Now, they say we are using fixed works rates. Now, like I said, this fixed works rates is the fixed rate set by the organization that for every unit that they produce, they will be getting 100 naira. Now, this one is different from the bonus set by the organization. This one is whether you meet the bonus or you do not meet the bonus, you are going to pay in according to what you produce. Now, 100 naira, let me put 100 naira here. 100 naira per unit. 100 naira per unit. Now, Ayo was able to produce 1,000. And then for every unit that he produced, it's going to get 100 naira. 100 naira multiplied by the total 1,000 units that Ayo produced. It means Ayo is going to get 100 naira, 100,000. I'm coming. Now it's going to get 100,000. That is his basic salary, whether he meet up with the target or not. It's going to be paid his basic salary of 100,000. What of Bola? Bola was able to produce 1,250. Now, 100 naira of the basic salary multiplied by the total actual productions for Bola. Now, Bola is going to be paid a basic salary of 125,000. Now, what of Muzina to pay 100 naira per unit multiplied by, she is the only one that produces much better. So it means she will receive above every other workers here. You know, she will be able to get 137 naira 500. Now, what of Dipo? Dipo was able to produce 900, and then the basic salary per unit is 100 naira multiplied by the total actual products produced by Dapo. Now Dapo will get 90,000. Now the fifth person multiply by 1,125. Now this person will get 112,500. 100 multiplied by 1,002. This person will also get 120,000. Now, remember from the question, they say whether you meet up the target or not, there is an additional allowance set by the organization that every employee will receive at the end of the period, which is 5,000. You know, this one is general. Whether you meet up the target or not, you have to receive this 5,000. Now we just come here, you write bonus, you write allowance. 5,000 per month. Now you just put the 5,000 for every employee. Let me just bring it down. Every employee. Now, whether they meet up the target or they do not meet up the target, this 5,000 naira is certain, is constant. They are going to receive it. Now, how are we now going to determine the total remunerations for each of them? Total remuneration for each of them. Now, Ayo was able to produce above 80%, which means he's not receiving any additional bonuses. But that does not stop him from receiving his basic salary and then the fixed annual bonus is set by the organization. Now, how much is going to be the total remunerations now? This plus the basic salary plus the monthly allowances or the monthly allowances set by the organizations. Now, it means at the end of the month, Ayo will receive 105,000. His basic salary is based on what the actual production that he produced, because we are using piecework rate system here, where rate of the production is being set based on what they produce. If you produce 10, each of the unit of what you produce is being charged based on what the organization have already been projected. So in this case now, an organization have already said that, okay, each employee is going to receive 100 naira per what they produce, but each unit of what they produce. So we are now allocating the basic salary based on what the employee produces here now. Now, not to take much of our time, we just drag this down. You know, it's already been automatic calculate. Now, Bola is going to receive a bonus of 4,000, the basic salary of 125, and then an additional bonus of 5,000, which means at the end of the month it will receive 134, and then moving on to receive 140. You know, she's the only one that received above every other workers here. The reason why is she was able to meet up the standard, even produces above the standard, which means what the organization sets for the standard that gives the room for additional bonus, she was able to get 30% above the 80% set by the organization for the standard, which means she's getting 6,000 for the bonus, and then her basic salary is 137,500, and then the allowances set by them is 5,000. which means at the end of the month, she will be receiving 148,500. Now, this is the schedule of the workers' remuneration standard or worker remuneration sheets set by the organizations. You know, this kind of remuneration can only be set in two methods. You know, they can use the payroll standard to set this, and then they can also use the second labor record method, which is timesheet, to set this. But in most cases, timesheet is usually used to set this, where an employee will be paid according to the level of activities that it produces. So in these questions now, if we're able to see this kind of questions in the exam, and we're able to come up with the solutions in this manner, we are going to get our 15 marks easily. But where we'll be having little challenges is how to determine how each of the employee was able to produce above the standard or above the actual percentage set by the organization, which is on this particular aspect here. So I will just briefly explain it again for us to get more understanding of it. Now, in the questions, additional bonus is said, from the question, they say additional bonus is 200 for each 1% of actual production above 80% actual production over standard. So on the neutral ground, what they mean in this area is, okay, it might be very difficult for some of the workers to meet up with the 100% of this standard. But if you are able to produce above 80%, you will be getting a bonus. If you produce 80%, you will not get bonus. But anyone you produce above the 80%, you'll be getting 1% of it. So if you produce 81% of the actual standard, you get 200 naira. If you produce above the 80% of the actual standard with 2%, you will be getting 200 naira. It means, okay, you're able to produce above the 80% set against the standard, maybe by 5%, and every 1% is 200 naira. Now, how are you going to determine the total bonuses that you are going to receive for that 5% that you're able to produce above the 80%? Just multiply 200 by 1% is 200 naira. Then multiply that 200 naira by 5 will give you the additional bonuses. That is what we just did here. Bola meets the actual percentage set by the organization, but it did not go above it. That is why he was unable to receive any bonus. But Bola produces 100%, which is 1,250 naira. And then it's above the 80% set by the organization against the standard. So now, the remaining percentage above that 80% now is 20%. You know, how do we arrive this? They said 80%, and then Bola produces 100%. Very simple. 100% minus the 80% will give you 20%. It means whatever the bonuses that we are paying Bola is going to be against the 20% that he or she meets above the standard actual production set by the organizations. So that is the same approach that we are going to be using. 80% minus whatever they produce. The first question is, the employee was able to meet up with the standard, or they were unable to meet up with the standard. If they were able to meet up with the standard, okay, with how many percentage? That percentage now is going to be what we are going to be paying them for the bonuses for. So I believe we're able to understand this. If you have any question, just unmute the mic and ask regarding this. If you have any questions, you can unmute the mic now and ask. So in regarding to this now, we have comes to the end of accounting for labor. So I will share an exercise regarding the second method, to also test our ability on how we're able to understand this. We say we have two method of remuneration: time-related system, as well as a what is it called? This one we just use now, the piecework or output-related system. And this one that we use now, it means for every unit they produce, therefore an organization have already set per unit for it, regardless of what they produce. If they produce 1,000, they'll be paying 100 naira per unit. So it means their basic salary is being fixed, while the other additional incentive is being paid regarding the productions of each of the workers. So if you have any question relating to this or what we have been discussing from the day one, you can just unmute your mic, then you ask now. And before we end up for tonight, I want to ask a questions. Now, in the situations whereby we were given an organization were given like an 95% actual 95% percentage based on the actual productions of each of the workers against the standard, which means, okay, if you are able to meet 95% of the actual productions, anything above that 95% is what you will be paying for, or is what the bonuses is going to based on. Can anyone just explain to me on how we can be able to calculate the bonuses for each of these workers? And then in these aspects where the actual productions is being set against the standard to be 90% now, how many percent does each of these workers were able to meet above the 95%? Can anybody just unmute the mic and tell me each of the employees that are qualified for this bonus, and what percentage did they use above the 95% bonus? I'll be picking
Okay, hello.
Okay, Mr. Jeremiah, I'm with you.
So I believe Bola is qualified by 5%.
Okay, why did you think Bola is qualified by 5%?
Since the bonus is 95%, so you said earlier it's 95% minus their actual bonus Is minus their actual bonus, which I believe is 100%. Or am I using the wrong calculation to do it?
Okay, you actually get it, but the explanation is what I was actually expecting you to be able to explain better. Okay, now the organization says that if every employee was able to achieve above 95%, based on what you calculated is 80%, but I just tried to add it to 95% now. Now, if every employee was able to achieve 95%, that is the reason why I put achieve here. Now, in this achieve now, it's telling us that, okay, does each of the employee was able to achieve the actual production that an organization sets against their standard? If it is yes, good. If it is no, okay, how many percentage were they able to produce? Now, let's look at this very well now. They set 95%. 95%. And then Ayo was able to achieve 80%, which means, okay, Ayo was unable to meet 95%. So in this aspect now, the only thing that Ayo was able to achieve is 80%. How do we determine the 80%? Is by dividing the actual product of what each of the employee produces by the standard. We help you to know what each of the employee was able to produce. That is the key thing that you need to know. Ask yourself, does each of the employee was able to achieve? If it is yes, by how many percent? If it is no, okay, but how many percent were they able to produce? Now, Bola, we say, okay, the actual production divided by the standard set by the organization. Now, Bola was able to meet with 80%. So Ayo is not qualified for the bonuses, but Bola was able to produce 100%. It means organization sets target to be 1,250, and then Bola produces exactly. It means Bola produces exactly what an organization set at their standard. Okay, is she qualified for the bonuses? Yes, she's qualified. Why is she qualified? The standard set is 90%, but she produces 100%. It means she's qualified to receive 5%. So let us know if the percentage of which the organization sets against their standard, and that will also help us to know if each of the employee was able to meet up with the standard set by the organizations. So the purpose of it is just to encourage them. Now that it's only one person that was able to produce this above now, and then following the next month, it has created a challenges avenue for each of the employee now to work better in order to meet their targets and also to produce above their targets. Yeah. So in the questions where you'll be having challenges is how to calculate the bonuses. How can you calculate the bonuses if this kind of related question were given? Know the actual percentage that is being set against the standard, and also know what rates. Okay, well, someone is just omit and ask the question. Omit and ask the question, please. Unmute and ask the question, or if you have the question.
Okay, so you said there's only one person that got above the 95%, but I'm seeing three persons
You
here.
know, okay, you do not understand what I'm saying. Now,
Yes.
in this aspect, now we have we have 4 people that qualified, but we only have one person that qualified the most, that have the highest percentage above other. So the reason why she's qualified above other is she was able to produce even above the standard of what the organization sets. We have 4 people that meet the target set by the organization, which is the 80% against the standard. But who is the person that was able to receive the highest bonus? It was only Muzina that was able to receive 6,000, because she was able to meet up the target above 30%. By able to achieve 110 percentage against the actual standard, or actual 80% set against the standard by the organization. So that gave her the opportunity to get highest bonuses. And then at the end of the workers' remuneration, at the end of the month, she was able to get the highest total remunerations, even though they have a fixed allowance is set by the organization, which is the 5,000. So that one is unchanged. So in these aspects, if this kind of things comes in the organizations, even though you are having challenges on how to compute the bonuses, just make sure that you understand how to compute this basic salary that was set against the actual. Remember, this basic salary is not charged against the standard. We are only charging it against the actual productions. This standard is what the organization sets. This actual production is what each of the workers produces. And then an employee can only get their basic salary based on what they produce, based on these questions. So you should be able to understand that very well. So this is where we will come to the end of our today's course. And then next week, our next class, will be talking about accounting for overhead. So I want us to try to go through it because time is against us and we still have a lot to cover. I want to make sure that at every class on how I'll be able to cover at least one chapter. So I will try as much as possible to cover it because we still have a lot. We have not done anything. We still have a lot to cover. So I want to try to be fast. At least at the end of the period, we're able to cover 90%. And while we are focusing more on the calculation part here, please always try to go through the calculation aspect, the theory aspect, because it's going to be 50-50. The reason why it's going to be 50-50 is okay for those of the students that like theory. It also creates an avenue for them to be able to express themselves in the theoretical approach. And then those students that love, giving their best in calculating aspects, they will also create an avenue for them to test their calculation ability. So please try to cover as much as you can so that we can both achieve our objective and make sure that we pass this course. And I'm praying that all these, our dedications and time, will be able to achieve it. And at the end of the exam, whenever the result comes out, please, if you're having any challenges, any questions relating to this, our course, or relating to ICANN in general, maybe on how to register, on how to pay for anything of the payments, maybe subscription, the exam fee, the exemptions, etc. So kindly chat me up privately so that I can guide you on how to do that. So I want to thank everyone for joining the class tonight. In the absence of we not having questions, so this is where we'll be ending our class tonight. So thank you for joining, and thank you everyone, and